third day at Sonoma State's Social Justice Week. I am Isael. I will be your host for tonight's Zoom session. Jamila will be our Zoom coordinator. She'll be taking care of all the tech stuff behind the scenes and making sure everything goes smoothly. Tonight we're going to be talking about, or we're going to have Paulina talk about how to talk about environmental justice. Pardon me, sorry. How to talk about environmental justice and climate change and how to have those difficult conversations with people. This session is a forum, so the first 30 minutes will be split up where we'll have our speakers speak about the issues and how to have those conversations, and then the second half of the session will be where we break everyone out into breakout rooms where we can have discussions about specific questions that Paulina will be sharing with us. And it's my pleasure to introduce Paulina Lopez. She is her pronouns are she, her, ella. She is an SSU student, a local climate change and social activist, and a coordinator at the Sunrise Movement of Sonoma County. Uh, Paulina Lopez was born in Oaxaca, Mexico. Her love for environmental justice roots back to her childhood, where she would spend most of her time outdoors playing and taking care of the environment she grew up around. Moving to California at the age of 9 years old, she found herself disconnected from her roots. Later on in her teenage/adult life, she began to understand and learn about climate change. Throughout her experiences with environmental disasters such as the wildfires, the floods, and power shutoffs in Northern California, Paulina felt that she needed to take action with her activism. She focuses on bringing environmental justice to all. She continues to see how environmental disasters continue to impact communities of color at significantly higher rates, and she believes that strong policies are needed to fight climate change, such as the Green New Deal. Paulina believes that there can be a just and sustainable future for all. Thank you. And here's Paulina, our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. It is such an honor, truly. My name is Paulina Lopez. My pronouns are she, her, ella. How cool is it that I get to be part of Social Justice Week in my own school, right? um, Before I get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our local Indigenous communities. I am standing on stolen Southern Pomo land. I want to acknowledge that our local Indigenous communities are still with us and that it is our responsibility to bring more visibility to their communities and respect their lands. It is important that we continue to support their communities by supporting their local Indigenous leaders and invest in their communities. To know more about your local Indigenous communities, please go to nativeland.ca and I will drop that link. And if you can please drop your name, your pronouns, and whose lands you're on the chat, that would be great. I am a climate slash social activist and a human rights commissioner here in Sonoma County. I am a community member and someone who truly cares about the well-being of the environment and our communities. This evening, I'll be talking about my activism with the Sunrise Movement. I have been organizing with our local chapter here in Sonoma County since 2019. For those that don't know, the Sunrise Movement is a national youth-led movement. Sunrise focuses on strong policies to combat climate change, such as the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a congressional resolution. It is a plan that focuses on tackling climate change by divesting from the fossil fuel industry, and at the same time, it focuses on addressing social issues such as economic inequality and racial injustice. This policy calls on the federal government to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions by creating high-paying jobs and ensuring a sustainable and healthy environment, including clean air and water. I got involved with the Sunrise Movement because I believe that policies like the Green New Deal can be applied here in my home, here in Sonoma County. Before I get more into detail about climate justice, I'd like to talk to you about my story and how I began to be active with my climate activism. At a very young age, my understanding, love, and respect for the environment was always there. All the towns that I lived in there were made up of local indigenous communities such as Mixtecos, Zapotecos, and more. I grew up in Oaxaca, Mexico until the age of 9 years old. I remember that there was a river that would run through my neighborhood, and I spent a lot of time there, whether it was cleaning my environment, picking up trash, or just playing in the water with my friends. The connection with nature was always there. I would say that this was the beginning of my climate activism. My relationship with nature was always present. I was that type of kid that would get very angry whenever somebody smashed a bee or ran away from it, although I was stung a lot of times. Then, at the age of 9 years old, I moved to California and grew up in the little town of Calistoga. Moving to a different country that didn't really value the relationship with nature kind of oppressed my own relationship with nature because my life changed completely as I had less freedom to be outside and as I had less connection with local indigenous communities. I saw the amazing forests and grew up in such a beautiful valley next to Mount San Helena. Even though I was very privileged to live in such a beautiful area, it was not the same. Suddenly, I turned 16 and applied to my first job at the farmer's market. Working at the farmer's market really opened a whole new world of climate change issues within our own food industry. I began I began to get more curious and learned about the negative impacts corporations such as Monsanto had in the environment, agriculture, and in its agricultural workers, and the health of people. Working at the farmers market really opened my eyes to many other environmental injustices, such as undocumented vineyard workers being exposed to harsh pesticides and herbicides without being provided with health care and not adequate personal protection equipment. Through high school, I continued to do more learning and more research about environmental injustice and the intersectionality with other social issues. Even one of my high school projects, as I recall, it had to do a lot about Monsanto. And I was just getting on everybody about Monsanto and talking to my friends about it and talking to my family about it. And just really like becoming an advocate to talk about the food industry and corporations like Monsanto. Because often, um, for so long, the climate crisis has been put the blame has been put on individual consumptions, right? Sometimes we feel guilty about buying a water bottle, but you don't have access to that. So really, learning more about Monsanto taught me that the environmental crisis that we have now should be uh, should be point towards these corporations, including the fossil fuel industry. As I graduated from high school and went out to the world, I began my higher education at the SRJC. I continued to educate myself about the environment and the climate crisis while working on my education. My understanding for the environment and the climate crisis went beyond just picking up trash at the river that streamed through my Oaxacan neighborhood. The climate crisis became more apparent to me as floods, power shutoffs, drier seasons, and wildfires began to impact our communities and our neighbors in Lake, in Napa County, and here in Sonoma County. As we continue to face these climate disasters, what became more clear to me is that the most vulnerable communities are the ones who have been the most impacted by these climate disasters. That's when I began to learn more about the intersectionality of the climate crisis and social injustices. Our communities of color and low income families are the ones who are mostly impacted year after year after year. Many of these members don't have second homes to evacuate to, and it is such a big financial burden that our local leaders don't think about. In 2017, during the Tubbs fire, I back to live in Calistoga. While I was still attending SJC, around 11 a.m., I received a phone call from one of my aunties, and she was desperate on the phone, freaking out because she said there was a fire. She said, "Go outside and look." I did. I saw the flames right in our backyard. By 4 a.m., my belongings were already packed. A few hours later, I evacuated. Many fled their neighborhoods from hell, leaving their belongings behind. My family in Knights Valley almost lost everything in their home during the Tubbs fire. I remember the unhealthy anxiety levels and sleepless nights. Friends have lost their homes. Communities of color continue to face this challenge yearly now. I work for a care home in Calistoga, and the stress and anxiety that I developed from evacuating our residents is still there. The feeling of my life being in threat of the climate crisis will never go away until we find a solution. Seeing the devastation of wildfires, it's really what did it though. It was a driven force that led me to become active because I just couldn't sit there and do nothing about it. I couldn't witness again and again how environmental injustice continues to impact our most vulnerable community members. After the Kincaid fire in 2019, I was just done. I had enough. I knew I could be part of making real change, and I knew I had to do something about it. I had no clue what I was going to do, but I just had enough. I said, ya basta. I had previously learned about the Sunrise Movement in a documentary. I remember seeing the news of Sunrisers, young people sitting at Speaker Pelosi's office. During an SSU event, I learned that there was a local chapter here in our hub, uh, and they had an informational table. So I remember the next meeting, I said, I just gotta get out there and see what's the Sunrise all about. My life completely changed as I joined. I learned the power that youth could have in politics for environmental justice. I learned about my own power. At first, I was a little hesitant to join because I realized that the movement was mostly white center and white led, which really made me question if it was the right place for me. But after learning about the Green New Deal and how it tackles environmental injustices while tackling climate change, I knew I had to be uncomfortable. As a brown woman, it was intimidating coming to a space like this. But thinking about environmental racism, thinking about climate crisis, and thinking about the fossil fuel industry and its impact on the environment, and our Latinx community continues to face, I had to go for it. It became my motivation. Today, I am one of the hub coordinators, along with our other hub coordinator, Janina Turner. We have been able to organize our local chapter where we deeply focus on equity within environmental justice. Our local chapter is made up of amazing young and caring individuals who have a passion towards climate justice. I have been able to bring more deep conversations about the importance of language justice within the climate change movement and how it is necessary to combat climate change in order to get more communities involved. My role within Sunrise really pushed me to do more and become a commissioner for the Human Rights Commission in Sonoma County, where I plan to bring environmental issues and its impact on our undocumented community, our agricultural workers, domestic workers, and cleanup workers. Because the environmental injustice is a human right issue. And I'll take a little break. I need some water. At federal level, I am working really hard with other sunrisers all over the nation. We are demanding and we are asking our congressmen and our congresswomen to pass the Green New Deal. And within the Green New Deal, we want to make sure that we get guaranteed of good green jobs for all, because this plan will create millions of jobs in the process in order to move our communities and our nation towards a more carbon neutral environment and also bring justice for all. Locally, I've been getting more involved within the county to find strategic ways to bring a similar policy like the Green New Deal at home. We come up with all kinds of ideas, and one of them was VRASC, where we started to write down our own ideas of how locally we can tackle these climate change crises. I've been getting more involved with conversations regarding environmental injustices. My biggest goal for this year is for communities of color and our local indigenous communities to have a seat at the table when making policy decisions to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030 here in Sonoma County, and to make sure it is a just transition for all. There is, as I mentioned early, historically the climate change movement has been led by it has been white led, which has created a big barrier within communities of color. Um, and it can be very difficult for our communities of color and even for our local indigenous communities to come to the table, right? Because for so long, we those white leaders that have led the movement, they have not focused on finding solutions that have to do with environmental racism too. Um, so so that's part of some of the things that I want to bring more focus on. It's important that those voices are there, and often at times, what our local leaders that here in Sonoma County that think is that our communities of color might not have a lot of knowledge regarding the climate crisis, but we do. The only thing is that they're not being asked, they're not being invited to the table. These conversations are not being brought to these communities, to lower income communities either. It can be very difficult to have conversations regarding environmental justice, because so many people don't understand the intersectionality that there is with social issues. Um, Environmental justice has there's just a that's what blew my mind more, because as I began to learn more and like grow my knowledge within the climate crisis, it opened like my whole perspective, that there are so many other issues that always connect back to the climate crisis. Um, so the climate crisis is here, and I have a hard time like trying to think that people don't believe in it, but there are some people that don't believe in it. Come on, there's still people out there that believe that the earth is flat, right? Um, but it is always good to have these conversations, and those tough conversations, how to how to talk about environmental justice, must be based on knowledge, facts, and most importantly, what I learned from Sunrise is the shared stories that there is. The power of stories can be very powerful to have difficult conversations. um, within environmental injustice. I actually turned the energy and power of my wildfire experiences and stories into my activism. It is my motivation to make sure that we have environmental justice for all. And I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Paulina. Do you want to write your questions in the chat so we can break everyone into the groups and proceed with our breakout session?
Yes, of course. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for dropping your names on the chat, and also for dropping your whose indigenous lands you're on. I really appreciate that.
All right. Hopefully everyone can see the questions that she just posted. And I will be breaking you guys into two groups where we can discuss these questions further and then come back together. All right, give me a second. On the street. And I believe Paulina let me know that this was the first time this has ever happened, I believe, in the country. So it's a pretty huge win, to stand up to such a huge corporation.
People power.
I guess the question I have is that climate change and environmental injustice can be like a conversation that some people, if they don't believe in it, they will just shut down to it. So I guess my question with that is how to have a conversation with someone like that in a way that they could potentially like be understanding, not shut it down before even hearing the question.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. The power of stories. It's something that I really, really would recommend. Sharing your story, how the environmental disasters impact our communities. I think when you share your story, it can definitely spark something in that person that might get them started to think about the climate change issue and environmental justice.
Actually, Paulina, first of all, thank you so much for just your wise words and your inspiration. It's a perfect segue actually into my question, which is about the stories. And I think what struck me, I'm a documentary linguist by trade and actually work in the Valley of Oaxaca on collecting oral history archives. And I think one of the important things about getting those stories out there is to record them. And I think this is a very powerful way of getting the voice of raising, of raising that voice and having the voice heard. And I think that Sonoma State offers an opportunity in the School of Social Sciences and students like you to collect those stories and get them on record and create that archive and make them public so that people can refer to them, because those stories, you're absolutely correct, are so powerful. And I'm wondering if you know of any efforts to collect these stories. There's oral histories that are done all the time, but these are such important stories because they're from people whose voices are not necessarily being heard. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm actually a history major at SSU with the minor in political science, and that's one of the projects that I actually have been considering. I'm currently working on a different project for the Black Lives Matter
Yep.
movement here in Sonoma County. But I've been considering on sharing those environmental injustice stories, especially within our undocumented, our agricultural workers, our domestic workers, and our people that are, you know, in our low income class. So I don't know if there's somebody already thinking about that, but I definitely been considering to do that as a history major.
No, I'm glad to hear it. And with the public history track, I think that you're well situated and you have great faculty who will support that. So I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you. Emma pointed out something really good on the chat. She said, people can argue with facts, but no one can argue with your story.
Something that we talked about in our breakout as well was like the difference in between individual actions versus collective actions that you can take. And really like that we're kind of pressured to take individual actions that like going zero waste or whatever that is. And like how effective that is versus taking collective action to really change things on a systemic level. That will have more of an impact on like actual like emissions numbers and all that.
Well, I think that was a very productive Zoom session for today's Social Justice Week topic. One of them. There's still others. First, I'd like to say thank you to Paulina, our speaker, and our facilitator Jamila for helping out with the tech and everything, and obviously to all you attendees who make this possible. One thing I want to ask you guys before you guys all decide to leave is I want to let you guys know that we are funded through the school's instructionality related activities program. In order to get funding, we need to provide information to the school, and we rely on you to provide this information through surveys. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat, and hopefully you guys can respond to our surveys so we can keep this going and perhaps do it next Social Justice Week and for many more to come. All right, I dropped the link. Hopefully you can all see it. All right, thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much, Paulina. That was great.
Thanks, everyone.
Zael and everybody in
Thank you for
Geneva.
being here. Thank
Nice
you
to
for
see you all.
inviting me.